What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of A Conversation With. I'm Nick Powills. Charles Internicola has joined us. Today we have another Meet the Broker. I'll say this comment, and Charles, you can provide yours. Probably no other time in the history of franchising has the broker community been as essential to franchisors. Franchisors are battling finding leads, and they're there. People are being laid off and looking at what's next. The reality is the broker community has built relationships in local communities, and they have a firm grip on who is looking and at what stage are they at. So I appreciate these conversations because hopefully it gives you, the franchisor, a little of insight into how do you work with these guys. Bob?
Yeah, Nick, especially here with Chris Goethe. Chris is also a development guy, so he's got experience on the development end, on the franchisor end. So this will be a really helpful conversation for franchisors.
Let's bring Chris in. Chris, thanks for joining us. Would love for you to frame what do you see out there? How's lead generation going? What are prospects telling you? What's the general feeling?
Those are three really big questions. How about if I take them one at a time?
Go for it.
Yeah, so let's start with the last one first, I guess. So if I were trying to answer what is everybody feeling out there, there's still a ton of unknown, right? So I think fear is probably the biggest emotion that I'm sensing out there when I'm talking to prospects. And it's not fear of the same thing. It may not even be fear of anything rational. It's just fear of the unknown. And I guess anecdotally, one way to describe this, I was talking to my 88-year-old father last week, and he said, "This is the first time I've ever seen anything like this." And I'm thinking, you think of someone who's been on the planet 88 years, and this is the first time he's seen it. And I know it's the first time I've ever seen anything like this. And then my children and their peers, this is the first time any of us have ever seen this. And fear is really kind of what I'm seeing more than anything else. And it's not really my job to mitigate that fear or to assuage it. I'll acknowledge it and kind of take it is what it is approach to it. And what can we do to keep living and keep moving without giving way to the fear? Does that kind of answer that question?
Sure.
As far as lead generation is concerned, Nick, I don't think I've seen, it slowed down for a while in February, March. And then when it picked back up, I noticed the quantity came back up, but the quality really wasn't terrific. And now you've had 3, 4, 5, 6 months where people have had some time to kind of process, why am I here? Where was I before? What am I going to do from this point forward? And how can I start to take measurable steps to get going in that direction? And I'm personally noticing that the quantity is up. It's not back up to full bore yet with most of the brands I work with, but the quality is certainly better. And the quality of conversations that I'm having with prospective franchisees is better. You know, they're starting to kind of understand what these last few months have meant to them in their career, and still not sure what it means going forward completely, but none of us really know that anyway.
Chris, as we reflect on fear and the conversations you're having and really your deep experience, not only as a franchise broker, but as a coach and, having experience on the franchise development end, are there gaps or opportunities that franchisors, franchise brands should be gearing up toward? And I know there's no silver bullet, but is there a checklist of items that franchisors really need to be improving on right now to build that momentum throughout this year and into next?
Well, yeah, aside from the obvious things that are really important to do right now, which is really understand your model well and describe it appropriately, but also describe it as how it can apply in these changing times. So, we hear a lot of conversation about recession-proof or recession-resistant brands. Well, we know that there's probably no such thing as a recession-proof brand because it'll hurt all of us. But essentially, what prospects are asking is, how can you mitigate as many of these risks as possible as I make a decision moving forward? So a franchisor really has to be able to communicate that effectively, right? This is what our business is all about, and we know that during these types of times, our model addresses it this way. And again, being able to communicate that effectively is paramount. I think if there's a characteristic, Charles, that kind of I would say is what I like to see more than anything else when I'm dealing with franchisors at this point is transparency and vulnerability in conversation. If you've read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it talks about that bottom layer of trust, right? And if that's missing, what do you need to do to kind of rebuild that? And the two components are transparency and trust. I mean, transparency and vulnerability. So as a brand, if you can just get transparent with everyone and say, we're aware that this is going on. This is the first time we've seen anything like this. Here's how we're mobilizing to address it. We're not just ignoring it and moving forward. So those are some qualities that I think franchisors would be well suited to address the best way they know how.
Chris, I love that as a framework, and I'm going to make some comments, and I would just love your opinions on it. I feel that two easy places, if I'm looking for what can change in franchising, say over the next 24 months, one is going to be the rotation of how you report financials in an item 19. I think there's going to be a swing away from gross revenue to break even, because if you take a restaurant brand that got hit by COVID that goes down 90% immediately, they're down. But a restaurant brand that is now down 15, 20, 30% with a different labor model and less use of the facilities where off-premise has taken over, then the profitability just adjusts so that the break even you might not be making the money that you were making before, but the break even has shifted. So I think that's going to be something that we need to look out for. And the other one is the insight in transparency are brands that have perfected the suburb model, meaning marketing to franchise buyers may have originally said, we want to grow in Chicago. And now it's going to change to, let's look at Schaumburg or Joliet or Aurora or Peoria, because the cities are going through some shifting right now, which might create some of that fear. So my belief is we're going to see a big rotation in who the prospect is, and we're going to be able to look at some of the data of them moving out of big cities into the suburbs as an indicator that they are ready for another life change. Any opinions on any of those comments?
Yeah, so my first thought is you think about how a franchisor makes this decision, right, about how to move forward with a franchisee. They look at the candidate, but they also look at the area. So what's happening essentially is a franchisor is trying to make an independent decision. Would I open up a business in this community, like the franchisee is as well? And they're using a variety of modeling tools to look at the demographic and look at what the factors of success have always or traditionally been in that brand. And to your point, Nick, that may be changing. So where a Ponco Chicken may want to open up in Metro Atlanta, now they may be looking at Toccoa, Georgia. And Toccoa looks very different demographically than Atlanta, Georgia. But the shift is coming, and they're trying to project a shift. So, yeah, I see that happening. And I also don't want to downplay the value of validation at this stage. Franchisees need to really take some time to validate accurately and appropriately with existing franchisees and try to make good determinations about how that's going to affect them in their market. That's kind of what that process is about anyway. But now they need to be asking questions like, so how did this affect you? And what do you think were the attributes of where you are that affected that, and why is it not affecting somebody in this area over here, and really try to size that up. That's kind of a whole new decision-making criteria, I think, for a franchisee. And I'm trying to look at it as a broker too, like how am I going to address that with them? How am I going to get them to really look at that and understand it the right way? It's a little tricky. It's new.
You know, Chris, that validation goes to your point, which I would say any franchisor out there, really any business, your points about transparency and vulnerability is really where a brand becomes genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's critical to everything. And it turns out if you're transparent and you acknowledge your vulnerabilities, you're probably also going to have the thought process and care to be looking out for your franchisees and have that good validation. So that all goes hand in hand, and I think that's critical. Getting to those points, sort of if I reverse it, Chris, are people overplaying the recession resistant and we're doing well in COVID, so now let's all jump into one particular area? Because if I'm going to be honest, which I am, I'm getting a little annoyed by certain franchisors that I don't think can support what they're selling, but they're selling because everyone's jumping on a van or they're jumping on a bandwagon because it's the hot thing during a pandemic that may not exist 12 months from now.
Yeah. You know, so again, back to your statement, let's just be honest here. You know, are you trying to do deals? Or are you trying to award franchises to people that will be a franchisee for 10 years and then sign another 10-year contract after that? And we got to get to the nut of all of that. Now, there's some industries, you know, Charles, honestly, that like senior care, for example, I believe is here to stay for a long, long, long time. As a consumer, I experienced it earlier this year with my 88-year-old father, who desperately needed that care for about 3 months with his wife. COVID or no COVID, it was there to stay. It had to happen. So when we talk about senior care as a recession-resistant type of a franchise vertical, that's kind of an easy thing to say or a no-brainer. Yeah. Everything else, you know, I'm not so sure. You know, auto service, auto care, maybe, you know, but then everything else is kind of in that gray area, and it starts to get kind of squishy in conversations. So again, you know, to your point, it all kind of comes back down to trust. So I think if there's a big question that our whole world is facing right now, it's like, who do I trust? What news source do I trust? What neighbor do I trust? What franchisor do I trust? And now we have to get to that same question here. What broker do I trust that will work and give me information? What brand can I trust to not try to sell me, but help me make a really good decision that's in my best interest and their best interest?
I mean, I think it's a topic that we're going to continue to talk about, even transparency within the broker community. I talked about this last week. We saw an email come across that said, hey, insert name at our company, even though we're not prospects, we're an agency. But it said, I'm a franchise broker. Are you interested in switching your career? Just so you know, I don't get paid anything by you. And I'm like, okay, let's call transparency out here, because the reality is the dollars that I'm spending and the franchisor increasing this franchise fee is so that the check is handed off and handed back over. So I still think there is some transparency in the broker community that could come front and center. And then ultimately, you're right, Chris, if we're transparent about as many elements of business, then what happens is the deal value actually skyrockets, because we're qualifying buyers that are going to be in our system for a long time, which is going to pay us a lot of royalty, and hopefully they scale their business, which is going to increase and increase and increase the royalty, that upon exit, the deal value is actually significant. So I think there's some good rotations going on there. The other thing that you said, I think is important, is, boy, on validation side, if you ask a franchisee in your due diligence, how did the franchisor support you during this? And there's anything less than stellar, run. Because that's table stakes today. Like that has totally shifted that if you didn't step up and support your franchisees in some way and they didn't feel confident in you, you're done. Like as a brand, sell now, get out of the way. So I do appreciate those statements. I do want to. There's not a name on this, and this question comes up all the time. How do you feel franchisors can assist the broker community for more qualified leads? We addressed it at the beginning. This is what all franchisors want. Get me more deals. Come on, brokers. How do I make you work better for me? I don't know that there's a simple answer, but do you want to take your swing at that question?
Yeah, I'll take a swing at it. So if there's a word that comes top of mind here, it's seamless to me. I love when I'm working with a specific brand seamlessly. And because when somebody reaches out in good faith and says, I'm interested in doing something kind of like this, but I've never done anything like this before. I want to try to be a franchisee. What does that mean? If I'm the first person that connects with them, I want that transition from a digital marketing campaign to a broker to be seamless. And then when I hand them off to the VP of development at a brand, I want that to be a seamless, again, we're back to trust, right? Can that be a seamless handoff as well? And then when they get to the very end of the process, I want it all from start to finish to be totally seamless, as if I'm an employee for that brand. I want them to perceive me that way. What can a franchisor do? They can help me in that respect as well. Don't look at me like a person that they have to do business with, and I don't want them, gripping a commission check in their hand at the very end. I want them to gladly reach out to me and say, please find me 10 more people like that last one you brought me, because they're wonderful and they're going to help me be successful for the next 20 years. That's what I want a franchisor to do.
Yeah, and Chris, it turns out if you uncover those stones to have that really seamless process where you're having these honest conversations, and you mentioned digital media, so it's almost like a continuing funnel, right? And brokers are on the spectrum of the funnel. And if we're going to have that integrity, here's our trusted partner at the broker level. And now here's our funnel to nurture and have that honest conversation with their candidates. I would challenge, that's not just a task that a franchisor could hand off to a marketing team or to input into whatever CRM system. I think that's a process where the leadership team of the franchisor really needs to sit down, answer the questions we've been focusing on: why us, why now, and then how to communicate that and do it in an honest way. So I think that's great advice. I also think, Chris, that's not easy advice. So 9 out of 10 franchisors are not going to follow that, or mostly, most businesses don't. But boy, if they could connect the dots with that advice on a seamless process and really combine it with an honest conversation that acknowledges that vulnerability, I think that's where the home run is.
Well, it's golden, right?
Yeah.
But the downside of that is you got to have to be willing to look a great client in the eye and say, this might not be the brand for you. As much as I love you and as much as money you have and you're ready to do something now, I really think you need to go a different direction, for your sake, for our sake, for your family's sake. That's a tough conversation.
It's that conversation that may cost a franchise brand a deal. I could guarantee will get them more deals than they'll ever lose.
Yeah.
And reduce their legal fees down their line. Get to Nick's point about deal value. And Chris, your great point, which is, is this going to be a franchisee who signs a renewal agreement 10 years from now? That mindset's key. And
take the business conversation out a minute, Charles, and say, our world is talking about things right now we haven't talked about maybe ever. Why don't we just do some good things for the world? Do some good things for people, and let's forget about our own money just a minute or our pocket. Let's just do something great for people. I sound like I'm preaching now, man. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's like the biggest quotable line of this whole video.
That's it. I think, Chris, appreciate the conversation. Obviously, the takeaway is still like transparency and relationship ends up being king in here. And for the buyer, find the right broker. Also, do your homework on the person that you're going to work with from a broker standpoint. And the reality is, even in your own backyard, you don't have to necessarily just stay in your own backyard if you're a buyer. Like, really do your homework. Find a broker that's really going to have your best interest, because everybody has the same inventory of franchisors. But appreciate the conversation. Thanks for spending some time with us.
My pleasure,
good guys. So, Chris,
thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Chris.